it's a tool. So that was really quite a story. And I want to start by asking the panelists, how do you see the utopian and dystopian intersections in science fiction? And where does AI fit? Max, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think the internet is so clickbait driven that it really exaggerates the controversies, but we're in a calm intellectual debate here at MIT, so I want to do exactly the opposite and argue that there's much less differences really on the utopia-dystopia spectrum than you might think. If you look at all the talks you've seen this morning, you know, talking about all sorts of wonderful things we want to do with AI, I would say at least 99% of all AI research is on these practically useful things or getting greater insight, which is generating maybe 1% of all the stress, dystopian stress in the world. I fully support all the work that we've seen this morning. About 99% of the angst expressed, for example, in statements by Geoff Hinton and Yoshua Bengio and many others, and Sam Altman and Demis Hassabis, that this could drive humanity extinct. 99% of the drama and stress come from maybe 1% or less of the researchers who are instead trying to build superintelligence, which makes humanity completely economically obsolete. And if you look at it that way, you know, 99% of the worries come from a tiny fringe effort. You see, it's very easy to get consensus about a good path forward. We just have to remember the ancient Greeks who taught us to not be too greedy and get hubris and mess up. And remember that AI can give us these incredible intellectual wings with which we can do the most remarkable things that we're hearing about here today, to create a more utopian future where AI always remains a tool, like Daniela said. We have built it for us. If we simply resist the temptation to try to fly into the sun, to the sun immediately, and like 2 years from now, 3 years from now, like some fringe people are saying, try to deploy systems that they think they can make that they don't even know how to control. So I think there's very clear middle ground here where we can have our cake and eat it.
Dina, Josh?
Yeah, so in the standard MIT practice, I want to disagree with Max.
Yay.
But also agree with you. So let me tell you what I agree on and what I disagree on. So just going back to the reading, so it was shocking that the robot was portrayed as brutally cold. And in fact, with technology, that's the exact opposite, I would argue. So we have the ability, and we will increasingly improve that ability of making robots that can sense your emotion and can understand emotion and feelings, and therefore be able to sympathize with you or exploit your emotion and mental state at a level that humans will never be able to do it. And just like if I want to think about how you guys feel, I just use the fact that from your voice, from the way you look, are you smiling, what's the expression you are putting on your face. But with the machines, what we have the ability to do now is that they can use completely different senses that we don't have. Like they can use electromagnetic signals to wish to understand how your breathing is changing, how your heartbeats are changing, whether you are sweating or not. All of that in addition to how you look and how you like your voice, and from that, understand exactly your emotion. Even if I don't care, if I care and I'm agitated, they will understand that. They would know about it. And that would allow them to go either way, to be even more, show more empathy, understanding, help people who are in bad mental state but trying not to show it, or manipulate our mental state by understanding us to a level that we couldn't even imagine a human understanding us to that level. So while only small percentage of the work is associated with disastrous outcomes, the outcomes can be really disastrous. I don't want to say that I am pessimistic. Actually, I think there is humongous number and types and areas of benefits. But the fact that it is 1% versus 90% does not make a difference if the 1% is a nuclear bomb.
Josh, where do you stand on this?
I think that it was important to hear that reading because it does warn us of a lot of the dystopian and disturbing visions that are at the heart of this science fiction reality that's starting to come true in some ways. And I think I agree with both of you guys. I think we don't have much time, so actually I'm just going to even jump ahead to one of the next topics, if that's okay, just because I think if we want to talk about the good or the bad dangers, what do we? I want to say a little bit about where we see things going, just to ground us there. I was really inspired by Rod's talk. I really liked Rod's talk at the beginning, and some of the things that we heard in the last session from our colleagues, people I'm very lucky to work with, like Ev Fedorenko and well, actually everyone there. There's the science fiction vision that we're sort of talking about right now, which generative AI is really engaging because it's the first AI system that engages the general public the way science fiction images of AI have always done, like a machine that you can talk to, a computer that you can talk to. And yet it's totally crazy in all these other ways. It will make things up. There's some, we don't really know how it works. There's all sorts of very irrational things at the heart of this system that seems so intelligent. And there's another vision of AI that, again, that Rod talked about, that the other colleagues talked about, which is really, to me, what we work on in our cognitive science, which is building AI to understand intelligence, to understand it, and to understand our own minds and brains, like the way Ev was talking about understanding the language system and the other systems. So I see a future that's not too far away, actually, that, again, can be part of steering us in the positive direction, where we're not just generating words and text, but we're actually generating thinking, where we're able to connect the power of these systems that can generate not just language, but code, with the kinds of code that we've been writing for a long time in computational models of cognition and some of the other AI approaches that Rod talked about that can really capture thinking. So like Ev's talk said this really nicely. There's the language part of the brain, and then there's all the thinking systems, including the theory of mind and emotion parts. And I think what we need if we want to see the positive future is to have is to be able to couple these advances in language models and systems that can write code with the right kind of code that can capture how humans actually reason. And that's the sort of thing we're working on in our group. So I'm very excited about that potential, and that's as a way to get to the positive parts.
So, Josh, going beyond language and code, what are you excited about, and what are you working on?
Well, the question is, what is the right kind of code, right? So in my work, it was one of the bullet points that Rod talked about, which hasn't been through as many hype cycles as neural networks, on their sixth one or something like that. But probabilistic inference, so the ability of the mind and the brain, that's not just a human ability, but throughout evolution, to build models of the world, to make good guesses and bets, to be able to perceive the world, figure out what's out there, and exert force on it to achieve goals. Like, that's what brains evolved to do, just as Rod talked about. And then language is this interesting late addition, which is like the human superpower. So we build these kinds of programs called probabilistic programs, which are ways of writing code that can make inferences and guesses on the world, do the kinds of things that I think will, in the near future, help to transform robotics. And then thinking about how basically the same way that language models right now give an interface to computers, not just AI, but to the digital world, to everybody without having to write their own code. Those language models can we can understand the meaning in those language models as code in these probabilistic programming systems. And then that gives a way both to sort of, to take advantage of all the scale of language models to scale up what we're doing, but also to capture the whole rest of what the brain is doing that Ev was talking about, which is how language provides an interface to the codes that brains build to perceive the world, to make goals and plans, to capture emotions, all those kinds of things, which actually we've been making a lot of progress on, but they haven't been accessible to the world the way that now with language models combined with that kind of code they might be.
Dina, what are you excited about?
So, like many people talk about making AI as good as humans. and in terms of like its intelligence. But I'm really excited about what machines and what machine learning, advanced machine learning can do beyond what we are able to do as humans. And let me just give you an example to make this more concrete. So we have the ability to see, right? We see the visible light. Imagine what would happen if we couldn't see as humans. Like, we would have no notion of color. We would not have an understanding of geometry the way we understand it because we see. We wouldn't know like how a human exactly would look like, and we wouldn't even like, maybe we wouldn't know for many years about birds because we cannot reach to them, we wouldn't know how they look or where they are. But there are many other senses that as humans we don't have. So we can sense, for example, electromagnetic waves. It's around us. We use them to send Wi-Fi signals and communicate via Wi-Fi, cellular, all of that stuff. But we don't understand them. Imagine if we had sensors to understand electromagnetic waves and learn over time, like from seeing an electromagnetic wave and what does it mean to have this wave versus that wave, and given that electromagnetic waves also can come from spaces that are very far away, being able to hear and talk to someone or some entity that is very far. And that's just open up a completely new world that machine learning and AI, by being able to sense new senses, like signals that we as a human don't sense, they can now, with the neural network, build an intelligence around those signals that can take us to completely different world and ability. So to give you a small example of what that would allow us to do, immediately now we know, for example, it allows us to have X-ray vision, to see through walls. But that's only something very simple if what this could open up if actually we can run machine learning on it and over time have the machine learn from that signal.
It's a great superpower.
Yeah.
Max, what are you excited about in your work with AI?
A lot of things. So first of all, I'm really excited about AI that, actually, let me ask you first. Raise your hand if you're really excited about AI that complements humans. Yeah, I'm going to raise my hand very loud, high for that. Now raise your hand again if you'd prefer instead AI that mainly replaces humans.
It depends on where it replaces a human.
But I thought it was a pretty clear difference in emotional response there. And also, raise your hand if you're excited about the kind of AI tools and AI solution findings that we heard about throughout the morning here in the form of AI systems that really are tools that we can control. So a lot of enthusiasm here. Who is super excited about building machines that we really have no idea how to control right now as fast as possible? Not so much, right? Who is super excited about just trying to make humans entirely obsolete on the job market? Yeah, so I think we see here, this is how I think about this, the whole thing. We have this, if you think of the technology we're building with AI as a car, clearly we want to build a strong engine in the car so we can accelerate forward to all the cool things that we're excited about. But we clearly also want to build a steering wheel and use it so that we go in the good directions and get the utopian sci-fi, not into the dystopian ones. And in my personal work, so 7 years ago, I shifted my research group from physics research to machine learning research. And we're mainly working on interpretability in various forms. I feel that a really key part to making the steering wheel good and making sure we can control and trust our systems comes back to what Joshua Tenenbaum talked about. I love the work, for example, that Armando Solar Lezama talked about also, where you raise the ambition level of trying to understand how these black boxes work. I'm very excited about the pace of progress in this field. You came to the conference I organized here on mechanistic interpretability, and just so there's this field, basically, which I think of as artificial neuroscience, where instead of studying a biological brain, you study a digital brain of sorts that's doing smart things and try to figure out how it works. And just in the last year already, there's been so much progress in this field that even in our group, we found, for example, recently that what looks like a massive black box large language model that seems sort of intimidating to try to understand seems like what it really is made up of lots of different computational quanta, as we call them. It's a little bit, it feels like a vindication of Marvin Minsky's theory of mind, that you can understand a lot of the brain by looking at what different parts do, one by one, rather than having to understand nothing for a long time. And I'm quite hopeful that if we can lift the veil of these black boxes and understand more what they're doing inside, we can not only gain an exciting scientific understanding of how these work, which is exciting, but we can also figure out how to make them work even better, make them even more trustworthy. And in terms of what Armando talked about, I think for safety critical systems, we can sometimes even take out the algorithms that were learned by a neural network in some sort of black box way and re-implement them in terms of code that we, in good MIT fashion, can formally verify and really trust. So that I'm excited about.
So-
Actually, can I answer this? I think one of the biggest problems of interpretability and explainability is that it needs to explain to a human, which assumes that in the first place that it cannot extend beyond how a human understands things, and it just limits. Like basically, you want to achieve two things. You want to avoid dystopian scenarios and put the human in control, and I completely agree with that. And also, I agree that you want, whenever it's possible, to have interpretability, explainability as well. But I don't think that that should be the upper bound, because in many cases, we cannot interpret certain things that machine can interpret much, much better. And explaining that to a human is just not really feasible because we don't think in that way.
Now, can you give an example?
So, yeah, I can give you an example. We can empirically show that a machine can detect that somebody has Parkinson's from their respiratory signal. If you ask the best medical doctor and you give him a respiratory signal, they cannot tell you whether this person has Parkinson's or not. But empirically, we can show evidence that the machine can. Now, you can try to explain it to the doctor, but really what you are doing is kind of like psychological experiments to try to make them feel comfortable that it relates to things that they understand. But humans can, like we see the world in localized way, while machine can look at evidence that are so far away from each other in different modality, in different scenarios, and bring them together. And we may not be able to interpret or understand everything. I think we need some other mechanism to allow machines to achieve the best for us as a human, to augment us in the best way, while at the same time not to lose control. And that cannot be just interpretability and explainability. Maybe it's just preventing them from controlling stuff. Like, I know you are in robotics, but I think robotics, for example, is much more dangerous because they start controlling the physical world.
Can I
Go
jump
ahead,
in
Josh.
and now disagree with both of them?
Yes.
I mean, but in an
Please go ahead,
agreeable
Josh.
way. Well, no, I mean, I hear you on that, but I think there's a difference between detection and understanding, right? It's still the human that is understanding what Parkinson's even is, and whether this machine should be trusted or not, based on science methods that we use to empirically validate things. I don't think we can outsource understanding to anybody but ourselves, and control is going to depend on that. I also think, as Max has talked about, and Armando talked about, science, human understanding isn't an upper limit. It is always transforming and improving. That's what science has always been about, and we use it by building formal tools.
Yeah, and
I don't
whenever
think
it's
they're gonna-
possible, we should go for it. And I'm all
Max, it's turn.
I just think we need that. We need to center understanding of any system we build, and also understanding what intelligence is, including our own intelligence and the broader genus that it might be a species of. That is absolutely essential.
Max, your brief rebuttal.
I
Brief.
just want to add a piece of optimism here and defend the robots a little bit, which is that I don't think we will need to understand everything in order to be able to trust it. because large language models are now on the cusp of really revolutionizing both program synthesis and also the ability for us to prove things about code, formal verification. And if we tell some powerful AI to go write a new piece of code that's going to control Daniela Rus's super awesome new robot machine, and then it gives us a proof that the robot arm is never going to kill the operator because it can formally prove that the arm will never under any circumstances go into this volume where the human stands. And we're like, oh goodness, I can never understand this because the proof is a billion lines long. That's okay, because I can write a proof checker that's 350 lines of Python that just checks that the whole proof works. It's much, much easier to check a proof than to find the proof. So we can outsource all that to the AI. As long as I understand my proof checker, I know that I'm completely safe operating Daniela's robot.
You're always safe around my robots. So we're coming so close to the end of this session. It went by so fast. Let me ask all of you a very quick round robin. We started with science fiction and superpowers. What do you imagine our next superpowers that technology can help conquer? Who wants to start? Dina already talked about X-ray vision and new sensors. Dina, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think basically I'm very excited about the changes in medicine that are going to happen. And basically, we just take an area like neuroscience, which we are so far behind in neuroscience because we can't understand, and we can't even measure the brain that well. So we go to animals because we can put electrodes in an animal brain, but an animal brain and how they have Alzheimer's is different from us and all of that stuff.
But what is the superpower?
So the superpower is really being able to understand at a level that, as I said, is probably by being able to extensively measure things without putting electrodes in the brain. I like to measure things with electromagnetic waves just because it has so much potential. Just measure the brain basically inside the brain with electromagnetic waves like Wi-Fi style electromagnetic wave, nothing that is dangerous, and interpretation with AI that would allow us to augment our senses and advance medicine.
So superpower is comprehensive understanding and curing disease.
Adding new sensing technology that we as humans have no ability to sense, like electromagnetic waves.
Josh, your superpower.
Well, I'd love to have that as a superpower, as someone who studies the brain. I really would like to have conversational AI, like AI that you can talk to, like in the science fiction things, but that we can actually trust the way we trust other human minds. And that does mean a kind of understanding. It also means understanding the limits of our own understanding. Okay. And so I do see that coming actually in the relatively near future by building on what's been really exciting about generative AI with some of these other tools that you've talked about. So I think, imagine if we actually had machines where, like right now, you give a large language model and you say write a proof for something, and it will often write a proof that is like completely bananas, right? So, and thinking is more than just proving. Like, think about all of science. What do we do in so much of our different areas of science? So many of our other inspiring areas of I see Nurgis over there, the Dean of Science. Like, hundreds of years ago, physicists came up with a few equations that they could solve by hand like Newton did. Now, in almost every area of science, including the social sciences, we write programs to model the world. We have uncertainty. There's things that we can't perfectly know, so we do various kinds of simulation and probabilistic inference to make good guesses, whether it's about, where this hurricane is going to go, or how a pandemic that has never been experienced with no data might possibly unfold, and what are the different ways to steer our actions in good directions. So imagine if we could have AI that can do the kinds of things, or like Rod talked about Alison Gopnik, and the work of how even very young children are like little scientists, as Alison has often argued. There's a common thread through line through here, which is the ability of a mind, individually or collectively, to build a model of the world and share that with others and use that to make good guesses and good bets. So I'd like to see AI superpowers that have that kind of real, genuine thinking ability, as well as the ability to talk to us and share, as we are now starting to see with these conversational AI
Global proofs and reasoning.
Well, yeah, but reasoning isn't just mathematical proof, but is all the kinds of both common sense and scientific reasoning that center uncertainty. We know we don't know about some things, and we also know there are some unknowns that we don't know yet, and we have to be continually on the lookout for that. That's where our understanding will advance.
Max has the last word.
All right, so if we can get that meta superpower of rigorous mathematical proof that the things we build will meet whatever specs we insist on, it unlocks all these amazing other superpowers, because then we no longer have to be afraid of building really powerful systems that go out and do things for us in the world. So we could build fantastic things out there in the world for sustainable energy, for sustainable infrastructure.
But what's the superpower?
So the superpower is that we can have all these machines that go out and do things knowing that they're always going to remain our tools. Then we would also feel confident sending them into space, I love space, of course, and what an opportunity there is to do a lot more there if we don't have to send a bunch of meat bags all the time, but we can use technology that our AI helps us build to spread this torch of life from our little planet out beyond our solar system and even beyond our galaxy. All of those superpowers get unlocked, I think, once we feel that this AI is trustworthy, so we can stop fearing it and start using it.
Going to the stars, curing disease, making the world a better place. These are all amazing things that we are going to do with AI. And so with this, let's give the panelists a big round of applause. And I would like to invite you to lunch, which is served outside. Please be back at 1 o'clock for our second keynote.